right, guys. Welcome back. Episode 13. 13 weeks in.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
It's a lot.
So first and foremost, we want to thank you guys for your continued support. Our growth is tremendous on our audio platforms and it's YouTube as well. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And yes. Don't forget we got the merch up as well. Our merch shop is doing well. We have some new items, crop top hoodies for the ladies. We have dad hats. We got a whole collection.
Yeah, it's like an on-demand service. You tell us what you want, and we'll make it for you.
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Like have it your way.
Yeah. We live
sure,
by that model.
For sure. So, all right. This is kind of like a school, college almost, in a sense.
Better than college, man.
Yeah, better than
Definitely better than college.
college. So, we want to give you guys all the tools that you need to be successful in business. And what's been coming up recently, we posted it on Instagram, is, intellectual property cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at Cardi B, and she trademarked her signature line. You want to say the line?
I gotta say it? There. Thank you so much. You saved me.
So she trademarked. She trademarked that. Then we had the Jordan logo, the Jumpman logo.
Yeah.
That was an interesting situation where the original photographer of that photo sued Nike because they pretty much kind of copied his photo. Some people think they did.
The likeness of the picture.
Yeah, and he lost the lawsuit on that. And then we also have the Fortnite case, right? Where Fortnite, if anybody's not familiar, is the most popular video game in the world right now. And they do all these different dances, and the creators of these dances were never compensated for it. So they sued Fortnite, and it's actually still in litigation, but it's pretty complicated. So it's one thing to be a creative and to create, right? It's another thing to actually own what you create and to be able to make money off of it. So what we're going to talk about today is intellectual property, licensing, copyright, trademark, all that stuff. So we thought, what better way to go into this conversation but to bring an expert in the field. So we have an attorney, Sabine Franco. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. She is a superstar attorney. She has her own law firm. She has her own law firm called the Franco Law Firm. And that's another thing we do with the show, too. We want to bring, the best of the best in professionals and to highlight them and to give. We don't want to just talk. We want to actually, bring people that are experts in the field and let them, add into the conversation. So that's what we're doing. And then she's also fresh off tour with DJ Envy, right?
I'm going to take you everywhere I go. I like this
Yes.
This is good.
So if anybody doesn't know, DJ Envy's heavy in real estate right now. And he has real estate courses that he offers all throughout the country. And he's put together a real estate dream team of mortgage brokers, attorneys, all kinds of different people that are related to the real estate industry. And she is one of the people that are on tour. So you are very lucky to have her give you some free game today. So thank you for coming. We appreciate it. No problem.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Yes. So we're going to jump right into it. Troy, you want to?
So, obviously, you're going to share your expertise. And a lot of us are novices in this field. So pretty much, what is the difference between a patent, a copyright, and a trademark? Let's start there.
Okay, so patent, copyrights, and trademarks are all intellectual property. And what intellectual property is, it's like something that you create with your mind, right? It's like a creative expression. And those different areas are areas that you could create, you could protect your creative expression, right? So a patent is a protection that you get for an invention. So if you have something that's new, that's innovative, that's going to change the way that people, live and work, technology, those things are patentable and they're very technical, right? So you actually need to be a patent attorney to practice patent law. But those things patents are going to protect inventions. Okay. Copyrights are going to protect literary works. So certain things that you create, but it has to be expressed. So it can't be an idea. So intellectual property can't be an idea. You can't protect an idea. Okay. So you have to express it. So if it's a writing, a story, you got to write it down. If it's a song, you have to write the lyrics, or you could record the music. If it's art, you got to draw, it has to be drawn or whatever. It has to be expressed so somebody could perceive
That's for trademarks.
That's for copyright.
Copyright.
That's for copyright.
And then trademarks?
And trademark is basically is gonna bring somebody back to the source of a good or service, right? So it represents your business, your brand, and it's gonna put the public on notice to know like where to go for that particular product or item. So there's two reasons. One, you want to protect your sort of like your work, right? So you create something, you have a business, you put all this sweat equity into it, and you have like goodwill. You know, as your brand grows, they expect a certain quality, a certain standard from your brand. So you want that to be protected so you can make money off of it. And then the government, the Copyright and Trademark Office, they want to make sure that if somebody gets hurt from your product or your service, that they know who to go to for that. Right. They come for you.
So like the Fortnite, when they were trying to do the dance moves, that's a copyright issue, right?
Yes.
It's a copyright issue. Because I just want everybody to understand, because legal jargon can be a little confusing, right? And even for like, I'm in business and I'm kind of confused by like copyrights and trademarks. So, all right. So, the dance moves is a copyright because that's something that it's like a physical thing that they made up.
Right. So they created it, and it's it's something like physical that they did. It's like a creative expression, like choreography, dance moves. And there's going to be an issue even with that when they go to copyright those, because from what I understand, Alfonso Rivera, the Carlton dance. He already got denied because they said it's only 3 moves, like it's not enough to be choreography. And I think that's gonna sort of change the way the law is, because like now everything is media. Everyone has a camera. Everyone's like creating dances, doing all this type of stuff. That has to be protected somehow.
Yeah. So like when Black Boy JB, he does that move and the kids just recreate it. Right. That's not really choreography, is what they're saying.
Yeah. So that's going to be an issue. I think that's an issue that's up for discussion.
Yeah. And then, all right. So then the trademark, like the Jordan logo, that's a trademark, right?
So in that case, they sued for copyright because the person who took it was a photographer. So photography, it's a picture. That's going to be something that's going to be copyrightable. Mm-hmm. So they're suing for the photo that what was it, that Nike did, the comparable photo, but also comes into question because now they use that as a logo, right? But he lost because they said it's really not substantially,
And it's interesting too because
I think they not to cut you off. They said that the tracksuit was the
it was the backdrop in the picture, the tracksuit, and the photos are slightly different. And it's interesting too because people were saying, well, you can't take credit for an image, but you actually can, because I remember when Cameron had the album. I don't know if you're a Cameron fan, but we're Cameron fans.
Okay. So then I'm a Cameron fan.
Yeah, of course.
He had an album called SDE a while ago, and the logo was the NBA logo, which is Jerry West. Mm-hmm. But instead of like the basketball, it actually had like a firearm in his hand. So long story short, the NBA wasn't too happy about that. Right. So they shut it down, and he couldn't use it. Yeah. So it's just interesting to see that, somebody can come up with an idea, but if they don't actually do the right legal steps, to somebody else can kind of take the idea and now they own it. Right.
And that's what's been happening for years. Like people who are ignorant to this type of protection that it exists. Yeah. They just create stuff, and people who know, they take it. And, just like all of the artists that came like, in the 80s, 90s, 60s, like they didn't know that they had an actual, asset that someone else is making money off.
Yeah, and that's what we want to really, because especially in our community, like we're very creative. We're creative people, but we don't always understand the business side of things and how to monetize it and the legal steps to take. So like you said, we'll make it and create it, and then somebody else will take it. Right. And now they actually own it. Mm-hmm. Right. So if somebody wants to actually go about setting it up, right? Like what's the steps of legally copywriting something or trademarking, or if they don't know the difference, should they do it via a lawyer? Can they do it themselves online? What's your advice?
Okay, so one, I have to give a disclaimer. So for anybody who's listening, what I say is for information only. I'm not your lawyer unless you hire me, right? So let's have to say that. But so if they want to, so the thing is, you should always hire a lawyer, because just with anything, like if there's somebody who's an expert in the field, you want to kind of rely on that person's expertise for nuances and things like that. But that being said, you can do it yourself. Like for copyrights, you could go on copyright.gov and you they make it really easy for you. So they kind of lay out, what are you trying to copyright? Is it, music? Is it a book or something? Is it, so they give you the options and then you select and they kind of walk you through the application process, and you could kind of click on stuff that will give you like explanations, like if you're confused as to what they're asking. So that's that with copyright. With trademark, it's a little bit more technical. So again, I do think you should get a lawyer, but their website has tons of videos on how to do it. It gets overwhelming, but if you feel like, I want to protect my stuff and I just don't have the money to invest in an attorney, they have videos that you could look at. And it's also sort of like you could be walked through the process. But the search is a little more tricky because it's just so much to go through, and their website is not really set up to give you like comprehensive results. Yeah. Like you could type in Starbucks with two S's at the end, two S's at the end, and nothing will come up. You know what I mean? So, but if you put it, exactly how it's spelled, of course, tons of stuff will come up. But, so that's how you can see how it's not that, it's not that easy for someone who is just a layperson to do it. But it's possible. You know what I mean?
Okay. Speaking of trademarks, we actually behind the scenes were talking about a trademark case that people may be not familiar with, but it involves a high profile person, Jay-Z versus Iconics. Yeah. And for those who don't know who our Iconics brand is, they're actually the company he sold Rocawear to. You want to touch on that a little bit? Yeah,
sure. So Jay-Z sold his Rocawear brand, his clothing brand, to Iconics, right? And they're like a big clothing company. They own a bunch of different, clothing lines. And so they ended up suing Jay-Z because he has Roc Nation. And they're like, well, you sold us this. It had some value to it. And now you're still using it, essentially, like you're using Roc Nation. So, and that brand is already associated with you. So it's diminishing our value. And so they had a lawsuit, and they were going back and forth, and they actually ended up in arbitration.
So the arbitration process is like the really crazy part of the story, because during that process, he finds out that, hey, there's no diversity in arbitrators. And he like files a suit for that, and he wins.
Yes.
And
okay, arbitration process is sort of like an outside of court process.
I was going to say, because people that might not know what arbitration is.
Yeah. So in most contracts, especially like when it comes to business, there's going to be an arbitration clause. So they don't want to have to go to court, like the normal avenue, go to court and have a judge decide. They rather go to like basically like a boardroom and have someone who's an arbitrator sit and listen to everybody who's like specializes in that area or whatever. So the parties get to choose who that arbitrator is going to be, right? They get a list, they get to vet and agree on who that person is going to be, or maybe a few people they'll choose. Yeah. And so what Jay-Z said is that, wait, there's nobody of color on this list. There was I think there were like two people.
Out of 100.
Yeah, something like that. And so he was like, no, I'm not doing this. So he basically said, I'm not going to go forward with the arbitration, went to court. Yeah. And actually, before the judge made a decision, the company was like, you know what, we're going to make sure that we do right and go out and get more, African-American and other people of color to be able to make these decisions.
So he's indirectly providing opportunities for people of color.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like he changed the game. Yeah. Like he does.
I mean, exactly. On so many levels. Like every time we bring it's like another way to change the game.
Jay to the rescue again. We've kept our streak of talking about Jay-Z
every single
episode. We've been consistent.
Mandatory.
Yeah. All right. Well, one other thing before we go to the next segment. Can you just briefly talk about licensing and what that entails?
So when you own these different types of intellectual property, patent, copyright, trademarks, the way that most people kind of really make money from them is that they license them to other people to use them. So as you build your brand kind of has clout, for instance, who was it? Jeff Bezos just bought the Washington Post. Yeah. So we know newspapers are dying, right? So you can get news everywhere now. So, but that name has a certain amount of status. So like if something's in the Washington Post, you believe it, right? So that's what people, once their brand creates value or has a value to it, you could license that to other people, because like say if they put out a story on the Washington Post, say it was a license and they licensed the name to him. He puts out a story, people are going to believe it. So that's why people want to license established brands. And so you can do it in terms of allowing them just to use it for a certain purpose or in a certain area, or to do in connection with something specific. So you could do it broad or narrow, and you could get royalties from it, or you could just charge a fee for it. And that's going to be through like a contract.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So now you have 101 of intellectual property. So the next segment, we are going to go into my favorite part of the show, which is story time. All right, boys and girls. So we are back for another edition of story time. So usually story time is the last segment of the show if you're a loyal follower. But the good thing about having your own show is that you can do whatever you want. So yeah, we decided to push it up. So we're going to follow up with the explanation of trademarking, and we're going to tell you guys a story. So we're going to go into story time. All right. So this is a very interesting story, right? So it involves the Beatles and Apple, right?
Two things you may know.
A 30-year court case between the Beatles and Apple.
All right.
Crazy. So the Beatles, right, in mid 70s.
1978.
Well, I think before that, they started a company called Apple Corp, right? Apple Corp was a holding company. It had a couple different uses, but the main thing was like their in-house record label, right? I don't know why they decided to name Apple, but that was the name, Apple Corp.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So in 1977, George Harrison, you know who George Harrison is?
The Beatles, of course.
Well, nobody really knows him. He's the Beatle that you never heard of, right? Most people never heard of him. So he it's ironic because nobody's heard of him, and he heard of a company that nobody's heard of that's just started out in 1977 around that time called Apple Inc. So he says, okay, this is pretty interesting. There's a company called Apple, right? So he goes to Apple Corp, the Beatles company, and he tells them about a company called Apple Inc., right? So the Beatles, Apple Corp, sues Apple Inc. because they're using the trademark name Apple. They already trademarked the name Apple. You can't use it. So in 1981, they settled a lawsuit for $80,000.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is that part of the settlement is that Apple Corp, the Beatles company, agreed to never go into the computer business.
Yeah.
Apple Inc., Steve Jobs' company, agreed to never go into the music business.
We're calling it the stay in your lane clause.
Stay in your lane.
This is our lane.
They could both use Apple,
Yeah.
but they have to stay in their lane.
Stay in your lane.
Okay, so it's going pretty good for a couple years. And then 1986, Apple comes out with musical instrument digital interface, right?
MIDI.
Yes.
That was good. That was good.
So you want to talk about that?
No.
Okay.
So I can briefly touch on it for those who are not in. So that's just a sound chip in the computer. So this is before, you got to think, we're thinking 80s now. So like this is like computers, they're not even in color. It's just like the green typing. So he's putting a sound chip in the computer. They're looking at it like, wait, sound? That could be music.
It could be music.
Could be music.
It's about to say something?
I was going to say, I think it also allowed the computers to communicate with musical instruments.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. So it allowed it's kind of like the beginning stages of putting music on a computer. So he said, wait. You're not so fast. You promised not to do this.
This is our lane.
Oh, you broke your promise. So now they sued him again, right? 1986, they sued him. So in 1991, they settled for $26 million, right? But they did something that was very petty at the time. So they, the 1991 Macintosh alert, the name is Sumo, and it's pronounced Sosumi. So it's like a kind of like,
Play on.
and it predicts what's going to happen in the future, right? Like saying like, Sumi.
Yeah, so that was part of the sampling of sound on the operating system. So like they had a new operating system. Now you can sample sound. Again, that sounds like music. We're going to have to sue.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So then this is where the big case comes in, right? Yeah. 2003, the launch of iTunes. So they just said, okay, we're not even going to play around anymore. We're going in the music business.
Right.
Sue me. Too much money out here not to be get. We're not going to be stopped by the Beatles, right? So they go into full-fledged with iTunes. So, of course, Apple Corp, the Beatles company, sues them, right?
But they sued them this time because of the logo. So like their logo is an actual green apple, and the iTunes logo was an apple that had like a little piece bitten out of it. So it was like, wait, that looks like our logo.
Partially the logo, but also the music as well.
Yeah.
So, but that case lasted to 2007, and Apple actually won that case, right? So now Apple Inc. owns the trademarks to Apple, right? But they licensed out they licensed out trademarks back to Apple Corp. Nobody really knows the terms of the deal, but it said that they settled for $500 million. So Apple Inc. paid Apple Corp $500 million.
Right.
And they finally were done with it after 30 years. And it's ironic because now the Beatles, when Steve Jobs, he was a big Beatles fan, right?
Huge.
And he was disappointed that they couldn't get the Beatles on iTunes because of this 30-year case, right? So now, when I think it was his 2007 speech.
His keynote address in 2007, he intros it by coming into the Beatles music.
Yeah.
So the crowd is like, oh, wait, we're about to get Beatles music.
He has Paul McCartney playing.
February 2007, they settle. And they released Beatles music, but as a solo artist. So George Harrison's solo music, John Lennon, Paul McCartney. I don't think Ringo had an album. Did Ringo have an album? I don't know. He might. I don't know. So their solo catalogs were released.
Okay.
And then 3 years later, in 2010, I believe, November 2010, the Beatles catalog comes to iTunes, which is like a big moment because that catalog is ridiculous.
You know, Michael Jackson owned the Beatles catalog at one point.
Sony ATV, yeah.
It's another conversation. So, why are we telling you a story? Because it's interesting, and also it highlights the power of trademarks, right? So the Beatles made almost $600 million. They made, between the three cases, they made $529 million, right? Kind of by accident because they just randomly picked the name Apple, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't really have any intentions of Apple Corp to like be a multi-billion-dollar company. It was like their in-house thing, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what music came out on Apple Records.
I don't think any music came out
from them.
I think they just ended up owning all the Beatles music.
Yeah.
And like you said, they had other businesses underneath there, like tax shelter to try to protect their...
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So just from having the luck of the draw and picking a good name,
Right.
but more importantly than picking a good name, they trademarked the name, right? Because they could have picked the name and then didn't trademark. So how many businesses and companies, and we going back to the Fortnite thing, where we have good ideas, but that one step changes the dynamic. $500 million, right? And so people say a lot of times it's like, well, it's expensive to trademark, or I don't have the money. Well, you either spend $500 to trademark or $500 million.
Look what it could do.
That you could have gotten if you did trademark it,
Yeah,
right?
I think like that's what we saw. Like 50 did that when he started that Get the Strap campaign. It was like, wait, people really like this. Oh, I'm trademarking this. This is mine.
Yeah.
Right.
No, if somebody want to use it, then they got to pay.
They got to pay now.
Yeah.
Going back to Cameron, he's notorious for that.
Oh,
he trademarks everything. Remember when him and Jim Jones had the riff?
You know what? That's a sad story.
Well, they made it. They rectified it.
Yeah, it was over Bird Gang.
He trademarked Bird Gang.
Just in case.
Yes.
Just in case.
So if anybody's a Diplomat fan, you know what Bird Gang is.
Anybody from the early 2000s.
So it was like something that they were just saying. It was like, it wasn't like an official thing because they were Dipset, Diplomats. Right. Then the Bird Gang was like just something that they just came up with, right? But then Jim Jones actually had a crew, like a offset of Dipset that he was calling Bird Gang, right?
Yeah.
I think he had like Bird Gang Records, and he was going full fledged with this.
Right.
And Cameron, without actually notifying him,
catches wind of it,
trademarks the name. So
genius.
He's no longer allowed to use Bird Gang unless he pays Cameron.
That's what friends are for, right?
Exactly. When you see I have something of value.
It's also rumored that he trademarked Jellyfin.
That's recently.
I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Yeah, shout out to Jellyfin. He just actually transferred from Minnesota.
Where he's going?
I don't know yet. He just left. He did 2 years at Minnesota, and now he's transferring.
Isaiah Washington, if anybody's not a basketball fan, New York City street ball legend. Not even a street ball legend.
Just a
legend.
St. Raymond's
basketball legend. Who he had a crew called Jellyfin.
Yeah,
huge.
Trademarked by the move, man. That layup, that open finger roll layup.
Yeah. Well, people might not be basketball fans, but I heard that Cameron, because the interesting thing about that, so the kid was in high school, right?
Mm.
And he created a huge buzz for himself in high school, like all throughout the city. Then it went national. Now with social media, it went all over the world, where you got kids saying jelly fam. It's like a finger roll. And it's like it just went viral. So then Nike started printing up shirts with the Jelly Fam shirts, right?
Of course.
And of course, he's not getting paid for. He's in high school.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Nike might be a sponsor for St. Raymond's. So like they felt like we had a connection. He plays for St. Raymond's.
Yeah, but he came up with the idea.
I know it's his idea.
Right.
So it's all going back to Apple, right?
Right.
Whereas we can relate this on small level. Like that's a perfect example of Jelly Fam, right? I don't know the rules if he could actually trademark it or not since he's in high school and his rules against like basketball players, but long story short, Nike did that and they made money off of it.
Right.
Right? So
and if he didn't protect it, then he can't really do nothing to police against it.
Now it's too late.
Now it's too late. Well, if they didn't protect it, he could still protect it. And then they would still have to pay him for using it if they're still continuing to make money off of it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But if you don't protect it, then you have no way of really so what registration does, it allows you to basically sue and be able to recover. So like with the Fortnite case, how they had to pull out of the case because they didn't copyright anything.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, the government's like, or the federal court is like, well, if you didn't copyright it, then you can't police against it. So you need to go do that. And so they pulled out. But if they do, or if they are successful with their copyright, then they will be able to sue them for the infringement.
You see like celebrities are doing that, like when they have children now. It's
Yeah.
like the first thing they do is, I'm copyrighting that name.
I think Blue Ivy.
Yeah,
but they lost that because there was a event planning company called Blue Ivy. And they were like, no,
they're still fighting it though.
Yeah.
They're still fighting it. There's an event planner. She has a company named Blue Ivy. And so, Beyonce's a beast with her. With her trademark game. She has her own company that just has her trademarks, and that's the best way to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. The power of trademarks. You have to understand the law, people. It's one thing to play the game. It's another thing to play the game smart and efficiently. Right? You don't have to be the smartest player to win.
Right.
But you have to know who to work with, who to contact, and you have to know opportunities when you see it.
Right.
And I'm sure these guys that made these dances up they never knew. They just doing it on their neighbor. Especially Carlton Banks, I don't know. He
been doing that
he
for
had
20
plenty
years.
of time.
Shame on him. But the Millie Rock, and they just doing it in their community. Like they're not thinking this is going to go viral to the world.
Right.
But you never know.
Well, they got the knowledge now. Now you got the knowledge.
Now you have the knowledge. Yeah. So, Well, we'll see.
All right. So for our final segment, we're going to talk about something that we don't have to look too far to find an expert for. And that is life insurance. We recently posted that Sears had canceled 90,000 life insurance policies for its employees. And it begs the question, like, should people be going through their jobs to gain life insurance? Over the past, 20 to 30 years, America has kind of switched. Like 108 million people have gone through the group route, while 102 million people have gone through the private method of getting life insurance, which is like the first time that's happened in history. So we have our own expert. In 2000, if I'm wrong with the year, 2006?
I think 2007.
2007, I sat down with a financial planner who's starting in the business. He needed a client, and he looked across, and he said, "Yo, Troy, you gotta get life insurance." Now, at 25, I'm thinking, come on, man. Why do I need life insurance? And then we had a deeper conversation. I'm like, oh, Rashad, he's pretty serious about this. So we went through the process, and I got life insurance. And maybe you could talk to people why it's so valuable and so desperately important, and how we've seen some cases where people didn't have life insurance and the outcome of what it left their family with, right? Because it's not really for the people who die, it's for the people who remain living, right? So, yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. So for anybody that's not familiar, I'm a financial advisor. That's what I do for a living, right? So I started 11 years ago, around that time frame. And yes, my first week in the business, my first client was Troy.
Yes, surely.
And yes, I sold him a life insurance policy. That was and then 11 years later,
still got it.
He's still a client of mine.
Yeah.
So I do a few different things. I help people invest money, retirement, and life insurance is one of the things that I do as well. So before I start, I'm not taking a side on any policy. Life insurance is very debatable. They're very passionate about this. I've noticed online. You have very strong opinions.
Right.
So I'm not here to tell you which is the best policy, what you should do. Just provide information. You can make your own decisions for yourself, right? But it is interesting that Sears canceled 90,000 policies for retirees because it does highlight something that is important. Is a lot of times people have insurance at their job, and they think that that's sufficient, right? Like most things, when it comes to finance, people aren't properly educated a lot of times, right? So they don't really fully understand life insurance or even why it's important, how to get it. They don't really know. So they just say, okay, I have it at my job and whatever. It is what it is, right? So now it's to say, okay, which is better, the insurance at your job or the insurance that you can get privately through an institution or a company, right? I always recommend both, right? Because the insurance at your job, the good thing about that is that it's usually very low as far as premiums are concerned. Or sometimes it's even free. So it's not really costing you anything. So it's always good to have, right? But the problem with having it as your only type of insurance is what we just saw, right? Is that a lot of times it's not portable, meaning that you can't take it with you when you retire. Or if you can take it with you, then the premium may go up because now you're no longer part of that group. It's like health insurance, right? Like if you leave your job, now you can still keep your health insurance for a certain amount of time, but you're on what's called COBRA, right? So now your health insurance premiums go up. So sometimes the life insurance is the same. Or even if the life insurance premiums stay the same, it's still subject to the company, they can change it. So just like what Sears did, right? So, okay. First of all, we need to talk about and understand why life insurance is important, right? So it's important for a few different reasons, but the main reason, obviously, is that you want to provide a certain level of comfort and you want to leave a legacy and you want to be able to take care of your financial responsibilities when you're no longer here. I always say all the time, it's nobody's responsibility to take care of your family except for you, right? And that's men or women, right? Because we live in a society where men and women work, and a lot of times women make more money than the men, right? They're the breadwinners in the home. Or they may be single parents on both sides, or even if you don't have children, you still have responsibilities, right? So I equate, it's unfortunate a lot of times, especially in our community, when somebody passes away and other people have to raise money for them, right? Like GoFundMe pages and things like that. That would be kind of like, and this is no shame on anybody because you have to do what you have to do, but I'm just saying as far as if that person didn't plan properly, right? That would be the equivalent of somebody coming into your home and having to pay your bills for you, right? It's your responsibility to take care of that, right? So that's what life insurance does, right? It allows your family to go on and to take care of your responsibility when you pass, as far as just the basics of burying yourself, but also, putting your kids in school and making sure that they have clothes to wear and that they can go to college and things of that nature, right? So, and it's important that we start to think long term too, because when we talk about generational wealth, that's like a real popular term, but what does that really mean, right? That means that you want to create wealth for generations. So one of the easiest ways to create wealth for generations is to have a life insurance policy, right? Because what you're doing is actually buying money, right? So that's one of the most efficient, one of the easiest ways to create generational wealth, because it's a trendy term, but the average person doesn't have a multi-million-dollar business that they can leave. The average person doesn't have $5 million in a bank that they can leave, right? The average person might not even have a home. They might not even own a home. But you can own an insurance policy. You can have $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. That's realistic, right? So this is something that can actually be obtained in real life, not just a catchy phrase.
So at 25, when you told me that, and I was, in my mind, I'm not even thinking about life insurance. But when I saw how serious you were about it, I'm like, wait, this makes perfect sense. I mean, you detailed it just like how you did now, straight from me. And I was like, wow, I have to get this as early as possible.
And you planned for the future because when you bought the insurance, you were single,
right?
But now you have a family, you have kids, you have a wife, you have a home. So now you really need it, right?
It makes more sense. I'm like, wow, that's a good thing I've had this for 11 years now, right? Like, it meant so much. I just want to go back because you said the premium is so low when you do it at your job. One of the things that studies have shown is that the insurance amounts are a lot lower when you do it with a group. So it ranges from $25,000 policy to maybe a $50,000 policy, whereas that might not even cover what you need as far as your financial responsibilities in the event that something happens to you. So like you want to talk about the difference in the amounts?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the amount, but first I want to actually just talk about the different types of policies.
Okay.
Right? There's different types of policies. So there's really a few different types of policies, but it comes down to two: term policies and a permanent policy, right? And there's different types of permanent policies, but a term policy is a policy that lasts a term, right? So like 10, 15, 20-year term, right? So you have life. This is what most people think about when they think about life insurance. It's the most basic form of insurance. Where you have an insurance policy, you pay a premium, and if you die, somebody gets money. So it's a term. So let's say it's a 20-year term, right? So you're paying a premium for 20 years. If you die before that 20-year mark is up, then your family gets money. If you outlive that term, now you can reapply for the insurance anymore. You can let it lapse. You don't have it anymore, but it's just a certain period of time, right? That's a term. And then most group insurances, if it's your job, it's for as long as you work at that job, or sometimes it could be extended in retirement. But so that's one form of it, where it's just a premium, a death benefit, and that's it.
Okay.
The flip side to that coin is what's called permanent insurance, right? So permanent insurance, most of the time, is most commonly known as what's called whole life insurance. There are different types of permanent, but we'll just keep it basic. Whole life insurance, right? Whole life insurance lasts your whole life. You pay a premium, you have a death benefit, but it also builds what's called cash value. Yeah. Cash value is money that grows inside of the life insurance policy, right? And the money that grows inside of the life insurance policy, now you can use down the line, and you can borrow from the policy. Right now, that's a benefit that you can use while you're alive. So.
Right. And that's good for people who say, well, some people don't really care what they leave for their family or, whoever else. If they're single, they have no wife or anything.
Right, because now you're actually saving money as well, so it's a double-edged sword, right? So now some people say, okay, well, only buy term insurance, don't buy whole life insurance. Or some people say only buy whole life insurance, don't buy term insurance. I'm of the mindset that no shoe is ever going to fit all foot, right? So you have to, see what's best for you and your family, because they both have advantages and they both can be beneficial, and they both have things that may not be attractive, right? So, but one thing that I want to keep in mind for our listeners is that one of the big things why people say buy term and don't buy whole life is that it's what's called buy term and invest the difference. Whereas they're saying that, well, whole life isn't a good investment because if you invested your money in stock or an investment, it would earn more than the rate of return that it would get in a whole life policy. That's true. But it's not an investment. It's life insurance, right? So it's like it's an apples to oranges. It's an apples to oranges comparison. Right. So you can do both. You don't have to do one or the other, right? Like you can have an investment where you're actually growing money. You can have a life insurance policy where it's a permanent policy. Because the thing about the life insurance also is that hopefully you don't die in 20 years. Right. It's like
nobody wants that.
I mean, you have term insurance. Most of the term policies don't pay out because most of the time people don't die within that term. Right. So if I have a 20-year term policy, I don't want to die in 20 years. So, it's good to have just in case. But the whole life, everybody's going to die eventually. Right. So it doesn't matter whether I'm 90 or 100 years old, I can still leave a legacy for my family. Right. So these are things that, people have to understand. And a lot of times in our community, it's unfortunate, especially, we talk about like Aretha Franklin, right? She passed away last year, and her estate, it was a mess because she never planned for her estate, right? And one of the things, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that she said that she never really wanted to do estate planning because she didn't want to jinx herself. And it's like, you're going to die. It's not.
We're all going to die.
Yeah, nobody. Look, newsflash. Right. You're not. It's going to happen, right? So either you plan for it or you don't plan for it, but it's going to happen either way, right? I just want to take a couple of minutes. We talk about estate planning because part of it is on the financial side, like life insurance, stuff like that. But it also is very important to plan on the legal side as well, right? So like a will. Right. So you're a lawyer. So what is a will? And why should people have a will? Because I think that everybody should have a will. Because a lot of times people have the misconception that if they're not rich they're not wealthy, they don't need to have a will, or they can wait to have a will.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody should have a will, and a will can be revised as time goes along. So
Absolutely.
can you just briefly talk about like what a will is?
Yeah. So basically a will is just like a plan for what's going to happen when you pass away. So you're basically going to say, for all the stuff that I own that's of value, I want it to be given out according to this, in this manner. And if you have small children, which is really, really important, if you have small children to have a will, you're going to dictate who's going to take care of your child. Because if you pass away and you don't have anyone in place to take care of your child, like a godparent is not a legal guardian. So some of us, you appoint a godparent and you say this person, but that's not good enough, basically. So a will is a legal document that, as long as it's executed, like signed in the proper manner, is gonna basically be able to say, this is what this person wanted, when they passed away with their stuff.
Okay. And then also I think it's important to have a living will, right? So a living will, from my understanding, so you have a healthcare proxy and you have the power of attorney.
Yes.
Right. So can you just briefly talk about both of those?
Sure. So the healthcare proxy, basically, if you get sick and you're in the hospital, your loved ones would not be able to make medical decisions for you, right? So the hospital is not going to really take their word for it. And it's also difficult, even if you're a spouse, you may not be able to dictate what happens to that person or how the hospital takes care of him or her. And so the healthcare proxy will say, if I'm sick, I want this person to make the decision and I want them to be able to do these particular things. And a living will kind of goes even further into that. It gives like details of like treatment, like say, God forbid you have cancer. It will say like, I don't want chemo or, whatever the case is, you can detail exactly what type of treatments that you have and give direction to the person who you gave the healthcare proxy to. So they have some understanding on how to act on your behalf.
Okay. And then the power of attorney.
So a power of attorney is also extremely important because if you're incapacitated, like you're still alive, but you can't make decisions for yourself, the power of attorney is going to allow you to appoint somebody to take care of all your finances, your insurance, your bank accounts, your homes, your real estate, taxes, anything. And if you're taking care of somebody, it'll allow that person who has your power of attorney to continue giving like customary gifts that you normally give to somebody or that you're taking care of somebody. So they can handle all those things to make sure that your affairs are in order. And so like sometimes people go, God forbid, into a coma, but they come out, you're not necessarily going to die, but you can't make decisions or you're just sick. So that kind of covers that.
No, it's extremely important. And just I'll take a minute just to tell a personal story. So my grandmother, she had 12 kids, right?
Okay.
So she had Alzheimer's disease. So when she was in the last stages of her life and she was in a coma and she was in the hospital. So long story short, half of her kids wanted to keep her alive. Okay. The other half of the kids were like, this isn't a quality of life. Like, we need to pull the plug. Yeah. Now they're fighting with each other. Who really knows what she wanted, right? But if she would have done that and written it out, like, look, don't keep me alive, like, keep me alive, it wouldn't be an argument. So regardless of how you feel, you can't make a decision because it's already put in place.
Right.
This is just, and also she owned a home, and once again, she didn't have a will, right? So now you have 12 kids that have different ideas of what they want to do with the home.
Right.
Some want to rent it out, some want to sell it. So now it just causes fights. You break up families, brothers and sisters stop speaking to each other. It happens all the time. It's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
So this is an unfortunate situation, and this is something that we have to plan for. So thank you for coming and and giving your expertise, because like I said, it's important, especially in our communities where we don't know a lot of this stuff.
And it's not a conversation we're having.
No, we're not.
Right. So it's like, hopefully, like this conversation here opens eyes. Like, hey, this is something we should plan for. Because, like what you said, nobody is planning. To die. But we should, right? Because, like we said, it's not for the people who live. It's for the people. Not for the people who die. It's for the people who live on with our legacies. Yeah. Right. So thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me.
Can you tell the people your information, how they can follow you on social media, your website, all that stuff?
Yeah, so my website is franco-lawfirm.com, or Franco with a dash and lawfirm.com. And my Instagram is Sabine, SABINE _ the purpose lawyer.
All right. And before we go, don't forget our Patreon.
Patreon's moving. Yes, Patreon. We have some new members on there. Like I said last week, we're going to be starting our Hometown Hero series, and we have a new series called the Blueprint series, where we're going to give a how-to into doing things, whether it be in real estate, whether it be in just everyday job training, or writing your resume, or what it looks like from a corporate side or a recruiting side. So we're gonna give a how-to, a blueprint on how to do that. I like a lot of people liked episode 11 where Derek came and gave a blueprint of the restaurant business. And
that was a great episode.
Appreciate that. Shout out to Derek and Homemade. So we figured, you know what? Let's do a series on blueprints of how to do things, just to uplift and educate our community. So check that out. That'll be on Patreon. It'll also be on YouTube. Continue to subscribe to that. Go to our website. Our merch is up. We're going to have a new line coming soon. So definitely keep supporting, man. Thank you.
And they're trademarking all of it, so don't.
We got our lawyer here.
That's a fact. And then before I go, I always say a book that I've read or that I'm reading. So my book tip of this week is The Four Agreements.
Ooh.
Love that book.
Yes. Changed my life. The book has changed my life. I read it a few years ago. And one agreement, my favorite agreement, is not to take anything personal.
Yes.
And it's something that has changed my life.
Yeah.
So I recommend anybody to check that book out.
Not an easy task, but definitely one that
It's
you
good,
you actually passed that book on to me as well. So
it's challenging to follow, but
oh,
it's good.
Man,
it's good
challenging.
teaching.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Well, we will see you next week. Peace.